When you say you know a thing, but you cannot explain it, I say you do not know it. For when you really know it, you naturally express it. If I should ask you now to define prayer, and say to you, how would you, through prayer, go about realizing an objective, any objective? If you can tell me, then you know it. But if you cannot tell me, then you do not know it. When you see it clearly in the mind's eye, the greater you will inspire the words which are necessary to clothe the idea and express it beautifully, and you will express the idea far better than a man with a vast vocabulary who does not see it as clearly as you do. If you have listened carefully throughout the past 4 days, you know now that the Bible has no reference at all to any persons that ever existed, or to any events that ever occurred upon earth. The authors of the Bible were not writing history. They were writing a great drama of the mind, which they dressed up in the garb of history, and then adapted it to the limited capacity of uncritical, unthinking masses. You know that every story in the Bible is your story, that when the writers introduce dozens of characters in the same story, they're trying to present you with different attributes of the mind that you may employ. You saw it as I took perhaps a dozen or more stories and interpreted them for you. For instance, many people wonder how Jesus, the most gracious, the most loving man in the world, if he be man, could say to his mother what he is supposed to have said to her as recorded in the 2nd chapter of the Gospel of St. John. Jesus is made to say to his mother, "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" You and I, who are not identified with the ideal we serve, would not make such a statement to our mother. Yet here was the embodiment of love saying to his mother, "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" You are Jesus, and your mother is your own consciousness. For consciousness is the cause of all. Therefore, it is the great father-mother of all phenomena. You and I are creatures of habit. We get into the habit of accepting as final the evidence of our senses. Wine is needed for the guests, and my senses tell me that there is no wine, and through habit am about to accept this lack as final, when I remember that my consciousness is the one and only reality. Therefore, if I deny the evidence of my senses and assume the consciousness of having sufficient wine, I have in a sense rebuked my mother or the consciousness which suggested lack. And by assuming the consciousness of having what I desire for my guests, wine is produced in a way we do not know. I have just read a note here from a dear friend of mine in the audience. Last Sunday, he had an appointment at a church for a wedding. The clock told him it was late. Everything told him he was late. He was standing on a street corner waiting for a streetcar. There was none in sight. He imagined that instead of being on the street corner, that he was in the church. At that moment, a car stopped in front of him. My friend told the driver of his predicament, and the driver said to him, "I am not going that way, but I will take you there." My friend got into the car and was at the church in time for the service. That is applying the law correctly. Non-acceptance of the suggestion of lateness. Never accept the suggestion of lack. In this case, I say to myself, what have I to do with thee? What have I to do with the evidence of my senses? Bring me all the pots and fill them. In other words, I assume that I have wine and all that I desire. Then my dimensionally greater self inspires in all the thoughts and the actions which aid the embodiment of my assumption. It is not a man saying to a mother, "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" It is every man who knows this law who will say to himself, when his senses suggest lack, "What have I to do with thee? Get behind me." I will never again listen to a voice like that, because if I do, then I am impregnated by that suggestion and I will bear the fruit of lack.